Water remembers what stone forgets. Beneath the Atlantic, where light falls like dust and cold learns to be silence, there are corridors that still breathe. They say that when the world was young and maps had margins, a city raised rings of stone like echoes of a heart that never slept. They called it Atlantis. The rest, drowning, pride, punishment, became plaster over ruins no one dared to question too closely. But the sea has its religion. It keeps, it presses, it returns. It begins with a sound, not the crack of a propeller or the creak of metal, but a round, low hum that comes from everywhere at once. I heard it first at 30 meters, while the blue still remembers the sky. The instructor called it the song of the thermocline. I called it a warning. We dove beyond the usual route, following a sequence of blocks that didn't look like rock. Polished corners, joints geology doesn't invent by itself, a line insisting on being straight in a place where everything curves. The sea, as always, feigned innocence. The first sighting was not a column, not a portal. It was a shadow, long, light, perpendicular to the sun. As we descended, it obeyed my body, not the light, measuring me, learning my weight, offering me a path that pretended to be chosen. I followed. On the bottom, through algae, I parted with my hands. There rose what I later called, for lack of a better name, a marine obelisk. 3 faces exposed, the 4th laid in hard sand like ceramic. On the westward face, fine, incised lines, as if stone had a handwriting, not letters. Forbidden symbols, the same I had seen on fragments in museums and in notebooks stolen from researchers who prefer hypotheses to grant committees. Truncated spirals, doubled hollow triangles, circles cut as if marking phases of something that isn't a moon. I ran a gloved finger over a symbol that looked like an O with a notch cut inward. The hum changed pitch, and the sea, which until then had pushed me with its usual courtesy, pulled back half a centimeter, enough for me to know I wasn't alone. Much later, I would call what I heard the voice of the crystal seers. That day, at the edge of my air, I felt only an old verb, summon, not in the ear, inside the bone. Language without pronunciation, messages without subject, a succession of shapes the mind translates as listen, return, bring. I came back. On the surface, wind. The boat, smaller than it should be. The instructor, too interested in the computer and not enough in my face. I performed normal. Nothing? He asked, already knowing. I said just stone, so jealousy would stay sleeping, and kept the secret under my tongue like a blade. I returned alone 2 days later at dawn. Smooth sea, pale sky, the kind of light that asks permission to become morning. I descended without hurry. The obelisk was quiet as a prayer already answered. I touched the notch again, and the hum opened like a flower in reverse. The sand fled in a whirl. Under it, a smooth oval stone that shifted at my touch. I lifted it, and the hole revealed a short tube made of something I couldn't name. Clear like glass, but milky as if alive, cold without being wet. Inside, lines, suspended like hair in resin, not drawn. Codes, Atlantean codes. The word came, and I hated it for being too easy. I carried the tube ashore with the care you give a nest, wrapped it in cloth, hid it in a box, crossed the city, avoiding questions. At home, I closed every window, shut off everything that makes a fake hum, set the tube on the table and sat like someone about to learn a foreign tongue with a fever. The material answered the heat of my hand. The lines inside began to glow as if blood were a lamp. Slowly, the chaos turned into a score. There was repetition, there were measures, there was music, and underneath, geography. I spent days and coffee tracing, overlaying, inverting. On Sunday before dawn, the drawing looked back at me. A star map, not any sky, a modified one. The constellations shifted as if the firmament had breathed too fast. Around it, small marks, numbers with no decimal base, signs that, aligned with stars from different eras, made sense. Final ages, or as I wrote in my notebooks, a stellar map of the final eras. At the center there was no cross, no compass rose, no great marker. There was a hollow circle with small black dots along the rim, like islets of darkness encircling an eye of calm. And the obelisk? A discreet arrow. One hollow triangle pointed to a star that today is modest, and in the drawing was a beacon. I ran precession math to it. When I traced the motion, the lines of ages converged toward a date I don't like to write. We call it now. While I erased and rewrote, the tube rested on the table like a patient animal. Sometimes I touched it and felt that faint vibration, the voice again. There was another layer there beyond stars, something closer to the mouth and to fear. I set my ear to it. The vibration became pictorial words. I saw, without eyes, a submerged hall, broad columns, low ceiling, light entering in blades and laying silver paths across the floor. At the back, a dark stone table, and on it, a thing that breathed light. Not an ember, not a mirror, but a transparent stone holding a storm. Around it, people, not Atlanteans, as in magazine illustrations, but figures draped in wet cloth that didn't cling, with adornments like crystals cut not for beauty, but for hearing. They spoke without voice. The stones answered without sound. When they tried to write, letters slid. Then an older woman, eldest among them, hair caught in fine silver threads, took a grey metal blade and marked the table with deliberate strokes. She wrote not a text, but a trail, the very thing I later saw in the tube. When she finished, she looked up toward the water the ceiling faced and ran a hand over her face, as if saying farewell to a mirror. I named that glimpse the forgotten manuscript of the last priest. I don't know why priest and not priestess. Perhaps because later in the vision I saw another figure, a very young man under a mantle too heavy, holding a ribbon of metal, and the word that touched my tongue was last. D, he wrote on a plate in haste, as if trying to fit the future into lines too short, and the plate seemed to drink the words like thirsty soil. What etched there was prophecy and instruction, 12 sentences, 12 keys. To the right, a childlike drawing of waves climbing steps, and beside it a symbol I would later identify on marine obelisks. 3 parallel strokes crossed by a 4th, transversal. It was the prophecy of global drowning sketched with little art and much urgency. It was not a simple flood. The waves he scratched were not pure water. They were water with names. Meltwater pried from where it shouldn't thaw, water shoved by winds that never learned to be breeze, water that climbs within rivers like a snake returning home, water arriving fresh and leaving salt because it stole memories no one offered. They knew. They measured tides like you measure fevers. They watched stars like you read clocks. They adjusted stones as you straighten a sickbed. When they saw the cycle closing, they didn't lower their eyes. They engraved. They left instructions like leaving a light on in a house where someone will arrive late. If the portals are not kept, water will enter not from below but from within. That's how I learned of the curse, of the guardian of the portals. Not a toothy named being, but a function. Keep crossings in a state of waiting, not invitation. Portals, physically, geologically, spiritually, are places where matter likes to change the subject. The priesthood I saw did not worship portals, it administered them. When the city prospered, they opened too many. When power learned that doors yield taxes, they sold passages like streets. People crossed from one station to another without respecting the time between rooms. Merchants came in a rush, generals with maps, the curious with appetite, and the traffic created wind. Wind, tide. Tide, duty. The guardian was the person and the rule said close. But the hands that paid did not like closed doors, and the city learned the vocabulary of hurry. You know the rest, or think you do, retold with heroics or fable morals. They called curse what was the bill. Days after decoding the main lines, I dreamed again. I'm in a flooded corridor, water to my chest, smooth walls, a floor sloping downward, and on the ceiling runs a stone gutter carrying threads of light, as if water and fire made peace there. At the end, a room where the water stops, as if the room were a gigantic bowl. In the center, a crystal sphere suspended by nothing, Around it, 3 people, 2 old, 1 very young. One elder whispers, the other corrects with fingertips, like tuning an instrument. The young one repeats inwardly. Suddenly the sphere brightens, and I see things that belong to neither water nor stone. A white metal column, lifting above the sea and collapsing into dust. A city with streets too straight lighting up all at once. A mushroom of light and wind born where nothing should be born. I woke with metal in my mouth. I wrote with a shaking hand, "Did Atlantis foresee the nuclear age?" The question embarrassed me. It sounded like clickbait, but I owed the vision the act of noting. Under it I added, other nuclear ages, other civilizations, another word for the same vanity. I needed an antidote, people, not just omens. I found the lost lineage of prophetic interpreters in the least likely place, a family notebook. My grandmother, who never sailed beyond dishes, kept in a cabinet a pile of papers in my great-grandfather's hand, a tide and tails fisherman. Among recipes and accounts were lines where he described hearing the sea speak in names. He wrote them like logging fish. Today the sea told me Helena, today Madalena, today out of season. Beside them, little drawings I had always assumed were boats. Now they were symbols, hollow triangles, slashed circles, spirals, rectangles open on one side. The same alphabet as the marine obelisk and the tube. My great-grandfather didn't know how to read what he wrote. He interpreted with his body. He knew when not to leave, when to return, when to raise the net. He didn't call it prophecy. He called it advice. The line had passed through him without fuss, through my grandmother, who kept, through my mother, who kept silent, through me, who write. Lineage doesn't need pomp. It needs continuity. I went back to the sea. I wanted to see more. I wanted to find codes incised in submerged ruins, the ones that escape eyes that only see stone when it decides to be statue. The obelisk guided me, not with light or arrows, but with absence. In certain places, water felt less dense, as if it wanted me near. I found a ring without its cupola, low columns like felled drums, and at the center, a slab with forbidden symbols so fine even algae kept distance. There were instructions I already suspected. Do not draw the circle whole. Leave a breach for the tide. Do not light every crystal. One must sleep. If the guiding star goes absent, do not replace. Wait. Maintenance council, not magic. Atlantis looked at me like a tired engineer weary of poetry. The city had been machine and temple, schedule and cult. When schedules fail, temples tend to scream. While I scribbled on a waterproof pad, the water went suddenly cold, as if someone opened a door in a hospital corridor. I looked up. Sunlight that came in sheets now fell in needles. At the edge of the ruin stood a smaller obelisk, broken, with characters only on its upper third. I put a finger to it. The stone didn't tremble. I did, because the vision came, and this time it refused to be just image. It entered and sat down. I see a room far above the sea, where air has the good weight of libraries. Tables, rolls, bright panels with points of light I understand as windows to something else. In the corner, a thin man, hair slicked by humidity, hands stained in blue pigment. He writes on heavy cloth, smears his cheeks with the corners of his fingers without noticing, writes again. The title in a tongue my mind translates as best it can, The Final Omen Before Collapse. He does not speak of guilt or angry gods. He speaks of calculation, when precession shadows such a star, when 2 mountains' ice sings in the same key, when algae grow before the wind, close. Seal portals, guard crystals, lower cupolas, shut down lines of light, sleep to wake later. If there is no later, he adds, sleeping anyway is a way to save the name. Yet he puts the manuscript in a box that looks like stone, but lifts like dry wood. Before closing, he scratches a small snake without a head, a message for future hands. Water has no face, but it remembers. I surfaced, choking, not on water but on time tightening. My air gauge said it was time to ascend. Getting out from depth always means bargaining with the one lord who never cedes, the body. On that ascent, another negotiation happened, the mind with what it saw and does not want to see again. On land, I vomited salt I had not drunk and decided I needed other voices, other eyes, people who had heard this old hum and had not turned it into a boat tour with marketing. I found few. An old Frenchman living on an archipelago, a pair of scientists who lost funding for finding signal where the panel saw noise, a woman with eyes too clear who stuttered at words for tide and stopped stuttering when she said window, door, threshold. And they showed me photos, pillars with slots that aren't erosion, holes in alignments where there is no work, channels that carry not water but light. They showed me fears. Two lost speech for hours after touching a stone. One saw his own name written backward in a band of shadow. Another woke with sand in his ear and the sharp memory of a star map sketched on his wall that vanished when he turned on the light. The city answers to many names, said the clear-eyed woman. The one it answers with is always silence. With them, I risked translating more of the tube. The prophecy of global drowning wasn't a standalone piece, it was a chapter in a larger manual. Besides portal closing instructions were language advisories. Do not announce with trumpets. Who needs to know will know. If an interpreter hears their own name said by wind, do not fear. Answer with a question. If the hall crystal flickers, do not run. Count to 300. Simple patterns proud civilizations find foolish until they need them. The old Frenchman brought a handwritten scrap on oil-stained paper. Forbidden symbols carved on marine obelisks. Notes from a salvage captain in the 1950s. He had seen them and did not know their meaning, but wrote them from stubbornness against forgetting. The scientist couple brought graphs, lines correlating the song of the thermocline with lunar phases and improbable tide whiplashes, maps that sketched the city as if salt were an invisible ink. I, small in the room, presented the tube like introducing a relative no one believes exists. The clear-eyed woman touched it and wept, plain, without drama, like greeting a grandfather returned. That night, all together, we did something I don't recommend but needed doing. We asked out loud, "What do you want?" the Frenchman said in a tone that would scold a grandchild. The hum came soft. "When?" asked the couple, pragmatic. The vibration faltered like a radio at the end of its battery. "Who?" whispered the woman. The tube went still. The answer arrived through another object, the smooth oval stone I always carry in my pocket, taken from the first dive, warmed, and I understood the reply the way one understands toothache, by pressure. Us, me, her, them, the lineage. Interpreters not by merit, but by bad luck and good ears. The work would not be miracle nor heroics. It would be maintenance, watch posts, locks, warnings. Days later, the sea did its part as a strict teacher. A storm with a beautiful name, waves with ugly numbers, beaches filled with people holding phones. We went to the obelisk site with the stubbornness of those who don't like to skip class. The sea, which usually topples, raised. Whole obelisks emerged for the hours the wind turned. We read what we could. What was legible in that improper brightness? Do not blame the water, blame the haste. There was also one last line, too brief for so many centuries. If the ring's shadow touches the triangle, go down with light, come up with questions. We looked at one another wearing a secular face of half understanding. Then came the final omen before the collapse. Not the city's, that one already collapsed into history, but ours, the one that would teach if we learned the cheaper lessons. It wasn't fire or quake, it was silence, a thick, soaked cotton silence covering an entire coast for minutes. Engines chose to fail. Radios remembered that noise is a luxury. People looked up and the sky, in turn, looked down without saying sun or rain. At the center of that silence, the small headline, two contrary currents stopped for an interval no manual contains. The scientists cried the way technical people cry, fingering buttons. The clear-eyed woman clenched her fists as if storing fire in a pocket. The Frenchman laughed, irreverent, and said, "The city called. Answer with less poetry and more care." We did what we knew. We closed small portals, which were not romantic, drainage gates in places that never needed them, old navigation routes reopened to create breaths where water flow gets lost, tide sanctuaries where stones, when restored in the right order, do what they ordinarily don't: slow down. On land, we explained as if forcing paradoxes into bulletins. Wait, do not substitute. Turn off one light so the other lasts. Do not complete the circle. We seemed ridiculous to eyes that demand miracles and grand gestures. We were useful to eyes that only cry when the salt is outside. On the last workday before normal life found its accent again, I returned to the first obelisk. I touched the notch. The hum arrived with the intimacy of a neighborhood grocer. I saw again the room above the sea, now empty, only the stone box there, weightless, open. The manuscript was gone, not from lack, but from fulfillment. Sleep, the priest had written. Sleep anyway. I felt an absent hand touch my present shoulder. It thanked me. I understood. I don't know which end the world chooses, but I recognize the omen that doesn't disguise itself. It does not come with trumpets. It comes with buoys that bob too much, fish that return early, maps that disagree with waves. It comes with children drawing circles with a gap in the sand, never having heard of Atlantis. It comes with voices saying your name, the way wind says names, without saliva, with precision. If you ask me what Atlantis prophesied, I'll say less flame and more care. If you ask whether it foresaw the nuclear age, I'll say it foresaw the mania for turning everything on at once. If you ask about the curse of the guardian of the portals, I'll say it was the power bill of a city that left its doors open. If you want forbidden symbols, bring gloves and respect. If you want the star map of the final eras, look at the sky not as decoration, but as contract. And if you want the last counsel of the last priest, I think it was this: do not run. Speak with the water. It knows everything because it has been in everything. Water remembers what stone forgets. We forget for convenience, but in the submerged ruins, whatever their name, there is always a voice tube waiting for the ear that didn't come for spectacle. If you hear it, go down with light and come up with questions. And when someone claps on the beach to see if the sea replies, remember what the clear-eyed woman said, the interpreter who only stuttered up to the threshold. The sea doesn't applaud, it takes notes.